and a later charge of misusing funds from the Teamsters pension plan. He was sentenced in 1967 to 13 years in prison. Appearance has sparked years of speculation regarding who killed Jimmy Hoffa, as well as decades of false leads regarding his final resting place. He was officially declared deceased in 1982, making the life and disappearance of James Riddle Hoffa a shady glimpse into the dark world of organized crime and unionized corruption.
What the hell is this?
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. Why did I just show you that video? Well, it will become apparent by the end of the show, because Mark Carney has been up to some very dangerous financial transactions. And we have a video that I think explains it very, very well. But before we get to that, in mere moments, I'll be right back to do a recap about what does this pipeline really mean. And I think it's very interesting. That's all I can say.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
So where are we with all this? Well, Stephen Guilbeault, as was pointed out to me this morning, might be losing a lot of money in salary when he relieves the cabinet. But Guilbeault's been accused of siphoning up to $254 million to his own company when he was environment minister. So maybe there's a nest. He's feathered his nest quite well. But Guilbeault resigning from Carney's cabinet on the same day PM signs Alberta Pipeline MOU. Now, I don't know how many of you, and I encourage you to say in your comments, some of you already said so, do you really believe this is going to be a pipeline? Because if you watch the show this morning with Alberta Prosperity Project legal counsel Jeff Rath, it's very highly doubtful, perhaps even highly unlikely, anybody's going to sign on to this, because, and I think this really is the sleeper quote of the week, perhaps, and we'll get. And here's Stephen. I'm not going to read all this. This is Stephen Guilbeault's lengthy letter about why he's leaving cabinet, but not the Liberal caucus. And the NDP, by the way, said they don't want him in the NDP caucus. So when the NDP don't want you at 7 seats, that's yeah. We'll get to the Maple pensions in a minute here. This is part of the pension here. But Elizabeth May, yeah, she was so excited this morning about the possibility of Stephen Guilbeault coming on over to the Green Party of One that she's misspelled her name. So I don't know if that was just one of those morning things with Liz, but a little bit embarrassing. But here is the kicker. And this did not happen during the joint news conference with Premier Daniel Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney. This happened afterwards when Carney got talking. And Daniel Smith has not talked about this. Jeff Rath this morning was on the show. We talked about this extensively because as part of this MOU, a part of the pipeline process, whatever that really means, the industrial carbon tax is going to go up 6 times. Let's listen to Mark Carney say it. If you don't believe me, he said it.
Core is tightening the tier system, which is the industrial carbon price system here in Alberta, to a level of at least $130 with a pass price from there. What does that mean? It means more than a 6 times increase in the industrial price of carbon, from its effective level, which is much lower than the headline level, the effective level, to the level that's committed in the agreement.
I don't do that. So, as Jeff Rath pointed out this morning, how many people do you think want to jump on board a pipeline project when the industrial carbon tax is going to be going up 6 times? Now, that's sort of a disincentive, I think, to getting people involved. And Danielle Smith has been talking about one company or a consortium building this pipeline. And she's made it quite clear, although not exactly definitively, categorically, but yeah, it should be a private sector project, not government money. Although, if you listen to her carefully, she hasn't quite ruled that out. And we showed you that this morning. But why is Danielle Smith doing this? Why is she doing this? We talked about this again this morning. But clearly, she's looking for a way to silence, suppress, or sideline the Alberta independence movement. And she has said, not exactly emphatically, but she has stated she believes if she has a deal, a pipeline deal with Mark Carney, that it will have an adverse effect on the Alberta independence movement. And this weekend, of course, she's going to be facing tremendous opposition at the annual general meeting of the United Conservative Party of Alberta. And there's a lot of people there who are not on board, with this pipeline project because they don't believe it's going to come to pass. They think it could be hijacked, perhaps by BC, perhaps by native land claims. And Carney might not even be that serious about it, although it's dividing the Liberal caucus because he didn't just lose Stephen Guilbeault in cabinet. There's a whole bunch parachuting out now. So clearly, and let's listen to what Danielle Smith has actually said about this.
So, I mean, I had always felt that the former government of Justin Trudeau created the independence movement, and my first conversations with Prime Minister Mark Carney were that he could end it. He could take the wind out of it. Because we saw this once before. We saw that independence sentiment was very high in the early 1980s when there was the National Energy Program. But when Brian Mulroney came in and reversed that policy, it disappeared. So I would say that good policy and genuinely addressing the concerns of Albertans is always a pathway to have a good and solid relationship. And I think the Prime Minister understands that. Certainly, based on this agreement, it shows he does. And so I'm hopeful. Thanks.
Now, I'm not convinced at all, as I've said repeatedly on this program, that Mark Carney is suddenly a friend of fossil fuels or a friend of Alberta or a friend of the West. Clearly, there are members of his caucus and cabinet who are enemies of Alberta and fossil fuels. But Mark Carney loves to play this both sides of the street, doesn't he? He's been a career politician, whether he's been a banker or not. He's always been a politician to some degree, promoting his own interests and promoting his special interests, such as green energy. And Mark Carney has been a champion, to put it in the most sympathetic term possible, of green energy. And why is he suddenly turning that off? I think it's because Mark Carney is playing a game, because it's all about making Mark Carney richer in the process. So this might all be a distraction, pipeline, no pipeline, because Mark, as we'll see later, Mark Carney remains up to his primary objective, which is to get richer. Now, here is Danielle Smith on my show when she said essentially the same thing about why Mark Carney's not the real enemy. And my jaw did not literally drop, but it almost did, because I think Mark Carney is potentially and realistically much more dangerous than Justin Trudeau. And of course, he was the primary economic advisor to Justin Trudeau during those years. So let's not say Trudeau came up with these policies all by himself. It was sui genesis. It was not. The progenitor of most of Trudeau's policies, economic policies, and green energy policies was Mark Carney.
I would look at it differently, because I have told Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, that Justin Trudeau created the independence movement in Alberta with 10 years of bad policies, 10 years of suppressing our ability to get our product to market, 10 years of invading provincial jurisdiction, 10 years of passing policies that violate the rights of our law-abiding firearms owners, 10 years of bad policy around immigration, I guess most recently in the last few years, that are beginning to put major pressure on our social programs. So there's a lot of bad policies that were passed by Justin Trudeau that created the current problem. But he's the guy who can fix it. I mean, you do from time to time see a leadership change, and it results in a sea change in a different approach. Jury's still out on whether or not he's going to unravel some of the bad policies. We put the 9 bad laws on the table. There are others, but we've made it very clear that we take the independence sentiment seriously, and he should too. But he can do something about it. He just has to make sure that he's respecting provincial jurisdiction and allowing us to be able to operate in our areas of jurisdiction unfettered, and that includes the development of our oil and gas resources.
All right, so clearly, Mark Carney has his own agenda, and Danielle Smith really does think this is going to diffuse everything that's happening with Alberta independence. And I can't overemphasize the fact that this has created almost like 3 parties. It's put Pierre Poilievre in an extremely difficult position. And of course, Pierre Poilievre is advocating very strong for a pipeline, but he's also saying categorically, and Pierre Poilievre is not always categorical about these things, especially if it involves his friend and political ally, Premier Danielle Smith, who he's been very close to. And he's saying this is nothing but a pipe dream. Carney delivered another pipe dream, which is probably the most popular expression right now to describe all of this. And so that puts Pierre Poilievre in a position of essentially not being in sync with his principal ally. The grassroots of the Conservative Party remain staunchly in Alberta. Pierre Poilievre's seat is now in Alberta. He relies upon that grassroots, not just in terms of delivering seats in every election, but those are the people who give a lot of the money, who give a lot of the service, who do a lot of the work for the party, because they are the ones, the true believers. So it's almost like we've got 3 parties here, because we've got the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives who don't believe this is a pipeline project that's going to work. We have the Alberta Conservatives under Danielle Smith, the United Conservative Party, for now anyway, saying this is a great idea and it's going to work just fine. And we've got the Liberal caucus split. So let's have a look at this here, because I think this is, yes, here we are. So the Liberal Party is split. We have a video to illustrate that. Sorry. There we go.
The Prime Minister walking into a meeting to reassure Liberal MPs about a potential pipeline deal alongside his Environment Minister.
We're not backtracking on the environment, and we ran a campaign on getting big things done. We'll wait till to see what the announcement is tomorrow.
On Thursday, Mark Carney is set to announce a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with Alberta, set to include language about a potential pipeline through British Columbia.
What are your thoughts on this MOU? Any thoughts?
No, not yet.
Earlier Wednesday morning, there was a special briefing for the 20 BC Liberals in the caucus.
I haven't seen the MOU.
The man behind that pitch was Mark Carney's trusted energy minister.
Minister, what did you tell the caucus?
We had a really good discussion.
But behind closed doors, one source says discussions were tense and candid. Publicly, Liberals showed a united front.
If we're talking about prosperity for the country, we all have to be united on all of these decisions.
There was a lot of information that was provided, and I think Canadians will be pleased.
Are you going to stay in caucus?
Questions, too, for former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault. Sources say he's been in talks with the Prime Minister's office over his concerns about the government's compromises on environmental policies. Sources say, as of now, Guilbeault plans to stay in his job.
I'm blessed to be a member of a fantastic caucus.
The Prime Minister downplayed questions about caucus unity, saying the Alberta deal is about more than a pipeline.
It's about building this economy. It's about making Canada more independent. And it's about making Canada more sustainable.
So, as I said, the Liberal caucus is very much not united over this. They were not united over the budget. They're not united over this pipeline proposal. Mark Carney just seems to be ignoring it because it's like he has his own agenda, and we can't ignore that. Now, let's have a look at this. Because if you recall, Danielle Smith said she wanted 9 things from the Mark Carney government. Does this pipeline MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, deliver full oil and gas corridor access? Achieved? No. Repeal Bill C-69? No. Lift the BC tanker ban? Yeah, potentially. Eliminate the emissions cap? Yes. Scrap clean electricity regs? Yes. And single-use plastics use? No. Return carbon tax oversight to Alberta? No. And federal censorship of energy companies? No. So she's only got 4 out of 9 in this deal. Is that enough for her? Apparently it is, because she is running with this. And David Eby, of course, is a wild card in this whole factor. But does he look like somebody who just lost his best friend or his last friend?
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So, as you say, there's no proponent, there's no plan, there's no route, really nothing there. Today, the Prime Minister said if there's no proponent, there's no pipeline, period, full stop. Do you interpret that to mean that there's not going to be any federal subsidy, as we saw with the TMX pipeline, and therefore the odds of this pipeline being built are rather remote?
I think this proposal has some major challenges. First of all, we already have a publicly owned pipeline. It is not at capacity. It is for sale. Nobody wants to buy it. For this new pipeline proposal, it similarly has no company that has stepped up and said, even under the most optimistic conditions, that they would be interested in building it, that if it were already built, that they would be interested in buying it, which leaves only one possible way that it could get built, which is through a massive taxpayer-funded support in the order of $30 to $40 billion of taxpayer dollars to get it built. Now, in that scenario, I think British Columbia has some projects that could compete with this one that would create just as much opportunity and be significantly cheaper to taxpayers. But we're not even asking for taxpayer dollars. I don't think one taxpayer dollar should go into this project, and I'm glad to see in the agreement that that is a condition. And I think that that is probably fatal to Premier Smith's proposal. I understand the Prime Minister was speaking to the Calgary Board of Trade and jokingly asked if anyone wanted to be a proponent of the project. Joking aside, there is no proponent. There is unlikely to be a proponent. And so even if there were a proponent, one of the key hurdles of coastal First Nations support has not been achieved. And it has been their position since 1977 that the oil tanker ban needs to be in place, because if there were an oil spill, their way of life would end, as would $1.7 billion in economic activity on the coast. Thanks, Premier. Next, we'll head to Katie DeRosa, CBC.
Premier, have you talked to the...
So he doesn't look very optimistic, and that's why I call him the wild card. And I say, Premier Smith does not believe BC or the Premier have a veto over this pipeline. She has said repeatedly that federal laws overrule any provincial veto, and that's how the courts have decided it. Well, Premier David Eby of BC doesn't seem to be in agreement there. But how angry are some Albertans about this? Because they don't seem to be getting really what they want. And when you've got the leader of the official opposition, the leader of the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, saying this is all nonsense, this is all politics, it's not going to mean anything tangible. It's creating a huge backlash. And here's, I think, the most shocking thing that Jeff Rath told me this morning in our interview. I encourage you to watch the whole interview because this is quite an assessment.
Danielle's finally come out of the closet and and said, "Fuck Alberta." Excuse my language. I mean, that's exactly what she said. It's like, to hell with Alberta independence, to hell with Albertans. I'm now a federal liberal, and I'm going to celebrate a 600% tax increase on Alberta industry, and I'm gonna sell it like it's a good thing. Like it's one of the it's one of the most ludicrous things that I've ever seen. And I mean, I think she's really underestimating the intelligence of Alberta voters and Albertans if she thinks that she can sell a $10 to $15 a barrel increase in the cost of production in Alberta, along with a 600% tax increase, like it's a good thing. I mean, I'm just beside myself. I can't even believe that this is that this makes any form of sense whatsoever.
Well, I guess final question, Jeff, and thanks for the time this morning. This has been fascinating, and I'm going to be watching all weekend because Alberta politics.
Yeah, I wish you were here. I wish you were here.
I wish I was here too. I wish I was there. But I find this whole thing just fascinating because as a Westerner, I'm originally from British Columbia, and I went through various phases of Western alienation, Western separation, aspirations. So I'm very much, my heart and mind has always been there in terms of watching what's happening. But are we going to see a referendum in 2026 that's where Albertans can say, yes, I want to support Alberta independence? Or are we going to get that referendum where you have to vote no to Canada is always going to, or Alberta will always be a part of Canada? Is that the best we're going to get?
I think that Danielle's continued premiership of Alberta will rest on whether she allows a proper referendum on a Clarity Act compliant question to go forward, right? Yeah. I mean, 70% of her party is now in favor of independence. And if they see her standing in the way of the democratic will of 70% of her membership, I think she's just declared herself to be Kenny 2.0, right? And let's call her public enemy number 2, right? Like, you can't continue to hold Albertans hostage and literally sell a 600% increase in the carbon tax as a good thing without people just going like, you've completely taken leave of your senses, and somebody needs to be like literally phoning in something under the Mental Health Act to have you put on a 72-hour hold and have your head read, because it's it's completely outside of the realm of anything normal.
Realm of anything normal. But speaking of which, Elizabeth May seemed to be the happiest of anybody, and she has her happy moments.
I would hope that the Prime Minister might listen. If Stephen Guilbeault, and you've just told me the news I hadn't heard before, Stephen Guilbeault leaving cabinet dashes the last hope that Mark Carney is going to have a good climate record ever. We need strong climate members of Parliament, because if there is not a party in Parliament that's a recognized party large enough to create a new political dynamic in this country, so far Prime Minister Mark Carney has tacked right, taking Poilievre's policies and embracing them as government policies. Without a strong party that's progressive to create some counterbalance in a minority parliament, we won't get better. We can get better with more liberal MPs standing up for climate, joining us, and creating a new force in the Canadian political scene. So if Stephen Guilbeault has given up on Mark Carney, Don't give up on democracy. Don't give up on climate action. Join us. Now's the time.
Well, we'll see if Stephen Guilbeault, yeah, and she was so excited about that prospect. As I said earlier, she misspelled her own last name and when she was preparing this video. So, yeah, and that is Elizabeth May. Now, so what is Mark Carney really up to? Now, it's taken us 25 and a half minutes to get to the point here of this afternoon's video, but you haven't waited in vain. Because while Mark Carney pulls these distractions in terms of promising a magical pipeline that I think he seriously doesn't believe is going to happen and seriously doesn't want to happen, this is all politicking. And while he introduces bill after bill after bill for censorship and surveillance of Canadians, and while he travels around the world sealing little micro trade deals for Canada and for the assistance of his old company, Brookfield Asset Management, what is he up to? Well, Mark Carney is potentially manipulating Canadian pension plan, not just the CPP, but potentially public service pension plan. He's manipulating these plans, and this is circular investment. And this video, we'll get to this video in a minute, but this is like a massive Ponzi scheme. And let's have a look. These are the Maple 8, the 8 largest public pension funds in Canada. They are collectively known as the Maple 8. Thank you, Coco McCool, for this. And are a significant part of the Canadian investment landscape. The specific funds included are Alberta Investment Management Corporation, British Columbia Investment Management Corporation, Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan, Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, Public Sector Pension Investment Plan, last but not least. So those are the potential pension funds that are available to Mark Carney. Now, I believe we have a quick video on how the CPP itself is a Ponzi scheme.
Work out that they're actually getting a nominal rate of return by 4%. And, I don't really go that much about the real rate of return, because the real rate of return is basically calculated using a fake inflation number. So let's just go with the nominal rate of return for now. Okay. Trevor?
Yeah.
Any ideas? Any ideas? You want to guess, like, why, if they get 8%, 9%, why is the retiree only going to get 4%?
Josh, I'm just too flabbergasted to even take a guess as to why the annualized earnings are only 4%. I'm sure it's going to really irritate me, but let's find out.
All right, here we go. Here we go, and this is the Office of the Financial Superintendent. This is the latest actuarial report. It's a big, long report. Okay. We're due for a new one at the end of the year. Probably 150 pages long. But all the values of CPP and all the diversity and equity and inclusion and all their goals and objectives, legalese, go all the way down. 150 pages until you get to right at the end. Footnote 14. Footnote 14 is the reason they should just put this thing in Paul. And it says, as at December 31st, 2021, under the closed group approach. So let me let me tell you how they try to sell this to people. It's like they say it's the open group approach, because obviously we're going to get new people entering CPP who are going to pay into the program. So under the open approach, open's a good word, right? We should be able to use that. Open's a good word. We could just openly use the new participants' CPP contributions to pay the old participants, okay? But if you calculate it on a closed group approach. So what that means is if you calculated the net present value of the obligations that you have today and measured them against the assets you have today, the actuarial obligations of the base plan, this isn't according to me, this isn't according to the Fraser Institute, this is the Office of Financial Superintendent, okay, are equal to 1,686 billion. Okay, so 1,686 billion, 1.6 trillion. Okay, the actuarial obligation
on Mark Carney's financial adventures, going all the way back to GFANZ when we did this report on the climate cabal that won't leave us alone. And this GFANZ, of course, was an attempt to force banks, to force companies into a green energy policy, a green energy stance. And the U.S. Congress actually set up a committee, or directed a committee to investigate this, to say that this was a consortium, this was a cabal, an environmental cabal, and Mark Carney should cease and desist. And so that's when a lot of the huge banks in the United States dropped out of this green energy policy. So Mark Carney just keeps looking for other avenues. And that brings us to the video I want you all to watch very carefully this afternoon. Because as I think it was Cassandra Moore just pointed out in her comment section, it's all about financing Brookfield. This is what this prime minister is all about. The corruption is waist deep, perhaps elbows deep, perhaps neck deep. We have never seen a government operate like this. Mark Carney doesn't care if his caucus is unified. They don't care if they like his budget. He doesn't care if they like this pipeline project. These are all distractions. This government, this liberal government, is all about ensuring it's Brookfield first, not Canada first. It's Brookfield strong, not Canada strong. It's all about nourishing and edifying and encouraging and pushing forward his financial interests. Now, this might shock you to say, well, how is he getting away with this? The thing is, he's doing this in the open. He's not doing this as a clandestine operation that nobody knows about. You know, you've heard it said that sometimes the best place to hide something is in the open, where people just can't see it. This is such a complicated process that most Canadians don't understand it and are not exactly encouraged to understand it. So Mark Carney's getting away with it. So let's listen to what he's doing.
Catastrophic death spiral, and he is making a ludicrous amount of money in the process. I'm going to preface this and tell you a little bit about Mark Carney because it's important information. I will keep this as simple as possible so it is easy to understand, and I will use analogies to simplify it further on the end so you can grasp exactly what has been going on. So Mark Carney championed net zero. He started GFANZ in the UK in 2019. The accumulated total of the capital access was over $130 trillion. His net zero actually started to collapse when Republican attorneys started to subpoena banks in the U.S. over anti-competition regulations. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and so forth all exited net zero. So he championed de-risking green energy investment because there's no return on green energy. You'll be a decade to 2 decades before it's actually profitable, if ever. And this is very important because what you do is you take federal funds, taxpayer funds, you absorb all of the liability and cost to make sure that the investment succeeds, and you offer this as a guarantee so the private investors will come and invest in that project. Bloomberg announced in 2020 that Carney was the unofficial economic advisor to Trudeau. Since he is unpaid and unofficial, it does not trigger the Conflict of Interest Act, and he has complete influence over Trudeau's policy with zero consequence. So the 3 key figures are Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, and Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland being the finance minister. from 2020 to 2025, approximately $190 billion has been allotted to de-risk green energy investment. Now, the problem comes when GFANZ is collapsing, that $130 trillion disappears. There's only one place that you can access that kind of capital as cash on hand, and that is a country's pension fund. So through Trudeau, he created all the de-risk policy. Through Freeland, who Trudeau appointed, and remember, Mark Carney is the godfather for child, the Canadian Growth Fund is created for $15 billion, which is used to de-risk green energy investment. Stick with me here because this is very important. The public service pension has very strict regulations for investing. It is only applicable to very low risk and typically an IRR compounding return. So you can't take pension money and de-risk green energy investment, and you can't use it to invest in green energy because it's typically a net loss. However, Mark's first transition fund, Brookfield Growth Transition Fund 1, later renamed 2, has PSP pension funds and Ontario Teachers pension funds as limited partners LLPs in that transition fund.
It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous to be dabbling, manipulating, playing around with union pension. You know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Because he was using the union pension, the Teamster union pension, to play the stock market, to get individually wealthy. He was using that money. And you know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Because either the Teamsters or the mob that was at that time controlling the Teamsters union said enough. So this is a highly dangerous practice for Mark Carney to get into. And because people don't like their pension funds disappearing. And that's exactly what potentially could happen here. They could lose it all. But who's going to get rich off this? Brookfield, Mark Carney, the crony capitalists.
In there. And I thought, how did he get pension funds into that transition fund? Trudeau, obviously. All the board members of the Public Service Pension and the Canadian Growth Fund are selected through a process of the Treasurer and the Finance Minister. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister gets final approval. These individuals are paid between 6 and 7 figures, and the Prime Minister can remove them at any time without cause. Do you think you would listen to me if I can remove your 7-figure salary just like that? Yet these management systems are considered bipartisan. They are a political tool. The PSP also created a subsidiary called the CCFIM that manages that $15 billion Canadian Growth Fund. Try not to lose me here. So the final close on the Brookfield Transition Fund 2, which Mark managed with Teskey, is $20 billion. And there is another transition fund with contracts with the UAE called the Catalytic Transition Fund for billions of dollars as well. Because this is routed through subsidiaries, disclosure becomes obscured. Now we're going to get to the smoking gun. This is just one example. Brookfield makes an initial investment of $300 million from this transition fund into Entropy Inc. in Canada. That is now a majority stake, and because it's not an investment in profit return, it meets the threshold for the PSP, which is your pension money. So a typical management fee at Brookfield for the entire fund is between 1.5 and 2%. What generally happens is as 100% of the capital is returned, I say returned, but you don't actually return the funds, there's then a 5 to 8% hurdle after that. There's a catch-up phase where Brookfield will collect 20%, and then after that, there's an 80-20 split to the pension fund, which is the LLP, a limited partner. I should put that in the beginning. So the typical time frame and thresholds for Mark Carney to collect on that extraordinary 20% could take up to 10 to 15 years. And now comes the magic. They used the Canadian Growth Fund to de-risk the entire project on a contract for 15 years on a guarantee for $16 million a year and $200 million up front. That means all liability, all debt, and all carrying right to the finish line is taken on by the Canadian taxpayer. So we would support the project right to the end, be at a net loss as the completed project belongs to a foreign entity who collects all of the profits and reaps all of the rewards. If you didn't think that was bad enough, here is the nuke. When a government contract de-risks the investment, it is legally binded and can be front-loaded immediately, which means that 15-year valuation that is down the road occurs instantaneously, jumps the hurdle, and the 20% kicks in immediately. So not only are we at a net loss, the project will be foreign owned and we have debt for the next 15 years and Carney gets paid immediately. Do you have any idea what the 20% payout plus management fee, even after you pay the other managers and the dividends are separated, just for Mark Carney? If he is able to de-risk the entire platform, and he's doing it right in front of your eyes, we are de-risking the UAE commitments, and the UAE has the contract with the Catalyst Transition Fund that he also managed. The maximum dollar amount is between $750 million to $1.2 billion. If you didn't notice immediately after the budget was passed, all of these commitments start rolling in because they're all being de-risked. And the incredible part is this. He took your pension money because you can't take tax money. It's not there. There's no pile of cash. Put it in a fund to attract other investors. It is a perfect circle, a snake eating its tail. And at the end of it, there's a net loss. We don't own the product. We don't own the profits. We'll get a little bit of tax and maybe some jobs. And Mark Carney will be a billionaire. That's like me taking all the money in your bank account, holding on to it to invest, taking half your check when you get it, taking 5% to put back in this money I took from you, and then keeping the rest. I hope you understand as this continues, this is the ratio change.
Now, this otherwise would be called a scam. This is what this is. This is how people get independently vastly wealthy beyond most people's wildest imagination. And it's the average guy and woman who gets stuck with it. And this is what's going to happen here. If this, and I can't see how this is not going to happen now. Mark Carney is going to be kept in power with those 7 new Democrat MPs, and it's just going to get worse.
Entry budget officers talking about. The debt is not only escaping the GDP, it's a contractual obligation for up to 20 years in some cases, meaning you can't escape. We are going to reach a no escape velocity, and even if you get him out of office, the damage cannot be recovered from. I have my suspicions that Chrystia Freeland was fully aware that this was going on, potentially has her own investments offshore, and she got the hell out as fast as she could when that last budget dropped, because Trudeau's budget was Carney's budget. Trudeau, Freeland, Mark Carney, complicit across the board. And if any member of that PSP fund signed an LPA, that's the limited partnership agreement, with simple interest instead of compound interest, which is the standard IRR, they're going to have a big problem. Because I ran the numbers upside down and backwards to see how fast I could make my money if I were Mark Carney and I was influencing the policy, and I would have put in simple interest annually versus compounding, because your front load becomes even faster. So every time we de-risk a project for 10 to 15 years, the firm like Brookfield front loads the entire contract for the full 15 years because it's black and white, and jumps straight to the finish line to get paid instantly. Think about that. Guys, I'm not talking about a little bit of money. The $6 million in stocks that they talk about, they told you that on purpose. Because when the Brookfield representative was in the House being questioned recently, who was clearly trembling, mentioned the stocks, but he also said carried interest.
Increases, the value of those instruments increase. There are also carried interest entitlements that relate more specifically to funds that we manage.
Which means your guy Mark Carney is going to be a billionaire. Do you understand why he came to Canada? Because he spent 4 years building this and trying to access our pension funds. Because it's cash on hand. He needed it. That's what he was after the entire time. And I said it, and he literally said it in a press conference the other day and mentioned the $2 trillion.
Over the next year, we will take significant measures to elevate our relationship. The Minister of Finance will lead a delegation of Canada's pension funds, $2 trillion of capital, which almost begins to sound significant in the UAE. $2 trillion in capital, the Canadian pension funds. They will come here next year early to deepen existing partnerships and develop new investment opportunities together.
It might be a coincidence. I ran a statistical analysis on the probability of all of those policies landing and those investments occurring in that exact chronological order. And it would be the same as if you built a plane, I built a runway, and you accidentally landed on that runway and not even knew where it was. It is impossible. It was facilitated by Carney, Trudeau, and Chrystia Freeland, and Carney actually did it all because Trudeau is as dumb as a bag of bricks, which I've said. This is cascade payment, and I've left out about 1,000 details that would just overcomplicate it all for you, but all you need to know is that it's a snake eating its tail. It's a completely false payback on our own pension funds with our tax money. Pension, tax money. This is what's happening. Go ahead and look it up. Send this to your friends. Send this to any economist that you know. Send it to Mark Carney. Send it to every PSP board member. Send it to Chrystia Freeland. I want everyone to know exactly what he's doing.
So the UAE might have your pension fund. This is why Mark Carney made a big dash in the middle of a visit by the King and Queen of Sweden. He made a huge dash to the UAE and to placate his investors, to make sure the process continued, that the plan unfolded. So what Mark Carney is up to. I think that video was as clear as it possibly can be. Maybe we have to reiterate some of the points. But this is about a massive financial scam that's happening in front of you in broad daylight. In broad daylight. It's because most people just simply don't understand. Not because you're stupid, not because because this is high finance that most of us will never have to grapple with. But we can sure as hell begin to understand it, because it could mean financial catastrophe for us. Yeah, it's one of the protesters at the farmers' rally last weekend in Ottawa. And believe me, Brookfield, WEF, Mark Carney, behind all of this. Behind all of this. And let's have a look at the merchandise. And here's some of our latest stickers. We're quite proud of these. And this is, we talked about PSYOPs yesterday with John Carpe. We talked about PSYOPs last week. And this is a PSYOP that's going on right now with the pipeline. He's getting a lot of people upset about this. But Big Brother is watching you, because what's the other thing that Mark Carney is very good at? Introducing legislation aimed at taking away your freedom of speech. And yes, we are conspiracy knowers. That's who we are. We have, and wanted to highlight these ones again. And of course, we still have the Ostrich stickers available, and proceeds are going to the farm. And the Ostrich hoodies, very, very popular. Keep buying them. Proceeds, again, are going to Universal Ostrich Farms. Katie Pisitney and her family. These have proven to be very, very popular. Now, and that, of course, I talked about this the other night at a speaking engagement I was at. This is the legacy of Trudeau Carney. It's an attack on basic foundational freedom of speech. And that's what this government has been all about. You know, from day one. Now, in the time remaining, I just want to show you, the time remaining, I would like to show you fundraising video I put together for Universal Ostrich Farms. And this is, we are doing everything we can to help his family out right now, to help out Katie Pisitney and her family, because this farm is facing just tremendous, huge, monumental, colossal financial penalties, including paying the legal bill of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, potentially paying for the operation. But that's all in this video, and I want you to watch it. David Krayden, independent broadcaster, commentator, writer, and journalist. I'm here today to tell you why you should support with your donation Universal Ostrich Farms. The fight is not over. In fact, in many ways, it's just beginning. Now, the voice and the face of that farm, especially during that brutal occupation by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the RCMP, was Katie Pasitne. She's been on this show with mine many, many times. And we've talked about that night of November 5th and early November 6th, when the CFIA marksmen slaughtered hundreds of ostriches. Some of them didn't die immediately. They lingered throughout the night. And this brutal organization finished the job in the morning. It was a nightmare for Katie, her mom, and all of the supporters who stood by and watched this atrocity unfold. And Katie buried her grief in her tears and the profound depression that came over her as a result of this. But Katie has put her armor back on, and she's fighting back with a new association that's going to be called A Voice for Farmers. And as Katie likes to say, it's not that farmers have no voice. They need to be reminded that they have a voice. And that's Katie's new objective. Let's listen.
Farm out there will have a chance to have some support and never be left alone in limbo or feeling bullied by an agency that has had no accountability, no oversight for decades. Remembering that this agency is an agency that has performs its own internal investigations, performs its own audits. They are only accountable to themselves. So making sure that every farmer out there has the ability to reach out to a support network within that association, whether it be a team of some lawyers, a couple vets, people that are all willing to come and bring their professional backgrounds into one area that we can support our farmers, support our agricultural sector, and give everybody hope for a strong, independent, healthy future in Canada for our animals, for our dedicated farmers, and even all of our farmers with orchards and our food.
So why do you need to support Katie in this venture? Because this farm was ordered by the Supreme Court of Canada when it denied its appeal of this execution of their ostriches. The Supreme Court of Canada ordered the farm to pay the entire legal expenses of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. That's about 11 months potentially. Could be millions of dollars. The farm could also potentially be on the hook for the costs of the RCMP CFIA occupation of their farm. That includes everything from the salaries of the officers to the bales of hay and the fencing that was purchased. That could also be a very hefty bill. And this farm has no guarantee that they're going to receive any compensation from the Mark Carney government, because the farm was not compliant through this process. So give today, donate today. Go to Justice for Our Ostriches. That's the new site. That's the new website that Katie will be running the fundraising and the association from. You can still go to Save Our Ostriches, which is still up and running. So I encourage you to do that today. Give generously today. This is about helping a farm and farmers in distress and helping Katie move on to her next objective. Yes, thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure being with you twice today. We'll be back again tomorrow with more of the news you need to know. We're going to continue to follow this Ponzi scheme that is the Canadian Pension Plan and how Mark Carney is manipulating things. because this could be the story that defines his tenure as Prime Minister of Canada. Everything else that's going on, that's really what's going on for Mark Carney. Thank you for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow. I've been broadcasting live this afternoon from Ottawa. See you. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I am going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.